Around 500 BC, the world was already full of powerful ideas. But those ideas were shaped in isolation, influenced by geography, belief, and local ambition. And yet, across distant places, humans were creating monuments that still speak to us today. In Mesopotamia, the city of Babylon became a symbol of engineering and royal ambition, and a legend grew around it. The Hanging Gardens, a vision of greenery rising above stone and heat. Far to the west, in Greece, a different kind of statement was taking shape. On the Acropolis, architecture became a language of proportion, order, and belief, a place where stone was used to express ideas that still influence the world today. This video is not about comparing civilizations. It's about seeing the same century through two distant points in the ancient world, and understanding what people were building, believing, and leaving behind. Now, let's begin in Babylon. Babylon stood in Mesopotamia, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This region is often called the cradle of civilization, and for good reason. Some of the earliest cities, writing systems, and monumental architecture emerged right here. By the 6th century BC, Babylon became a political and cultural center of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, associated with one of its most famous rulers, King Nebuchadnezzar II. When we imagine Babylon, we often picture a city built to impress. Massive walls, ceremonial gates, and a sense of scale meant to communicate power. One of the most iconic symbols connected to Babylon is the Ishtar Gate, a monumental entrance covered in deep blue glazed bricks, decorated with powerful animals and sacred symbols. It was not just a gate. It was part of a ceremonial route, the processional way, designed to be seen, to be remembered, and to send a message. Babylon was a city of order, strength, and authority. And among all the stories connected to Babylon, one stands out in particular: the Hanging Gardens. The Hanging Gardens are traditionally described as a series of rising terraces, covered in trees, plants, and flowing water. A green mountain built by human hands in a hot and dry landscape. If such a structure existed, it would have required extraordinary planning. Not only architecture, but irrigation and engineering, moving water upward, sustaining plants, creating shade, and building stable foundations that could carry the weight of soil, stone, and life. Even today, the idea feels ambitious, because creating a living monument like that means combining many skills: construction, water control, agriculture, and long-term maintenance, all working together. And this is where Babylon becomes fascinating in a very specific way. The Hanging Gardens are famous, but the historical record is not perfectly clear. What we have are strong descriptions from ancient writers, and a city that was absolutely capable of building something extraordinary. So, what can we say with confidence? We can say that Babylon was real, and it was one of the most impressive cities of the ancient world. We can say that Mesopotamian cultures had deep knowledge of water management, agriculture, and large-scale construction. We can also say that royal gardens were important symbols in ancient empires. They represented control over nature, abundance, and the ability to create beauty through power. So whether the Hanging Gardens existed exactly as the legend describes, or whether the story grew over time, the idea itself tells us something true about the ancient world. People weren't only building for survival. They were building to express identity, ambition, and imagination. Now, let's look at the map for a moment. Babylon stood here, in Mesopotamia, in the heart of today's Iraq. And now we travel west, across the Mediterranean world, toward Greece. Different landscapes, different city-states, different beliefs, but still, the same broad century. And our next stop is the Acropolis. The Acropolis is a rocky hill rising above Athens, and for centuries, it has been one of the most powerful symbols of the ancient Greek world. But when we talk about the Acropolis in this period, we're usually thinking about one building in particular, the Parthenon. Construction of the Parthenon began in 447 BC during the leadership of Pericles, and it was dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of the city. What makes the Parthenon extraordinary is not only its size, but its precision. This is where architecture becomes almost like mathematics. The proportions feel balanced. The rhythm of the columns feels intentional. Even the way the structure meets the sky feels carefully designed. And there's something else that makes it even more impressive. Some of the most famous classical buildings include subtle optical refinements, tiny adjustments that make the structure look perfectly straight and harmonious to the human eye. In other words, it wasn't only built to stand, it was built to be seen. But the Acropolis was not just a beautiful skyline. For the people of Athens, this hill was sacred ground. It was a place where the human world and the divine world felt close, where stone architecture became a way of honoring the gods, and especially Athena, the protector of the city. The Parthenon itself was more than a temple in the modern sense. It was a symbol of devotion, power, and belief, a reminder that in the ancient world, great architecture often served a higher purpose. Even the sculptural program of the building carried meaning. Mythological scenes, heroic stories, and symbolic conflicts that reflected how the Athenians understood order, chaos, and civilization. So when you look at the Acropolis, you're not only seeing design, you're seeing a worldview built into stone. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the Acropolis becomes more than a monument. It becomes a lasting example of how ideas can be built into space. Because in the ancient world, architecture wasn't only about shelter or function. It shaped how people moved, gathered, and looked at the world. It created a stage for public life, for rituals, and for memory. So in the same century, two distant points in the ancient world answered the same human need in different ways. Babylon imagined a garden rising against heat and dust. Athens carved its ideals into stone and sky. And maybe that's the real lesson of history. Civilizations fade, borders change, names disappear, but the desire to build something meaningful stays.